Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Economics with Robert Wenzel. I'm Robert Wenzel. This week's topic is Welcome to the club. You might be a Marxist. Now, there's an awful lot of Marxist thought, Marxist views permeating the country at this point, and many people may not realize exactly how this is happening. We're going to look under the hood at Marxism today and see how many Marxist views you may hold. Now, the main Marxist theory that most people are probably most familiar with, the fundamentals of Marxism, is the idea that there is this class struggle between the capitalists and the laborers, between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and that the capitalists exploit the laborers, and that at some point the laborers will really get fed up with this and overthrow the capitalists, and we will get a socialist revolution, a communist revolution, and enter a period of communist utopia. That's the view that most hold. But in addition to that, there are a lot of steps that Marx saw along the way that would move toward this utopia. But here's the problem with all this. And there's actually a group of Marxists that saw this problem. There's one key Marxist in Italy by the name of Antonio Gramsci, and there were Marxists in Germany, in Frankfurt, known collectively as the Frankfurt School, who also saw the problem. They saw that capitalism was so good in creating goods and services and increasing the standard of living that there would never be a revolution, that the proletariat was getting too fat and happy, that there was no reason for them to attempt to overthrow the system. And they were right. Capitalism basically raises all boats. In a free market system, as opposed to a crony system, which is what we have now, in a free market system, the only way a capitalist can advance and make more money is providing goods and services across the board, including to the masses. And that's what happens. So people see more goods, more services, from flip phones to complex cell phones with smart apps and whatnot, to flying at one time exclusively to the rich businessman, to now anyone can fly. Across the board, we are seeing advantageous increases in goods and services, which do not create any incentive for the masses, the workers, the proletariat to want to overthrow the society. The Gramsci recognized this, and the Frankfurt School recognized this. So they came up with something much more clever called cultural Marxism. They said, well, if the people won't overthrow the system based on economics, we're going to have to attack it a different way. We're going to have to move in terms of cultural Marxism. By that, they mean they would invent struggles based on gender, based on race, which is what we have now in the United States. It really comes down from these guys, from Gramsci, from the Frankfurt School guys. And basically, the idea was economics is not going to do it. Capitalism is providing too many goods and services. People are not unhappy with the system. We have to find something that they're going to be unhappy with. And so they invented these struggles. And that's what the cultural Marxism is now. That's what the social justice warrior, cancel culture, wokeism is all about. But, and this is kind of amazing, in addition to this wokeism, these new cultural class struggles, intermixed is the ideas that Marx wanted to use to advance his economic Marxism. It makes absolutely no sense at all. First of all, there's problems with these class struggles, which is for another video sometime. But the whole idea of these cultural class struggles was invented because the economic system was working so well, the capitalist system. So why would you want to introduce ideas of Marxists that advance a change in the economic system into your class struggle stuff, other than you just want to throw everything up, destroy Western civilization, and introduce something else? It's really a power grab, but that's again for another video. You got these class struggles invented, then you got introduction of how to advance the economic revolution when the people behind the Cultural Revolution admit that there's no reason for the economic thing. The people are not going to revolt because they like what's going on. So why would you put them on a track for this economic revolution? These steps. So let's take a look at these steps and see how many of them you're supporting right now. I introduce my copy of the Communist Manifesto. It's a very, very short book, actually. Most of it is filled with forwards and conclusions. You got, let me try that again. You have a preface and then you have an afterword. And basically, that fills up a large portion of the book. The book itself, very, very powerful book, is only about 60 pages, which brings me to a side note. I have a book out called Foundations of Private Property Society Theory. It's my view on how we can move even into a more free market system, and it incorporates everything from national defense to police departments to business across the board, private property society. Now, what's interesting, there's a comment left on at Amazon that my book is very, very short, but I said what I had to say, and I hope it lights the fire. But it's 120 pages, and the guy thought it was too short to start a revolution or whatever. But Marx's book is only 60 pages, so mine's double that. And based on Marxian labor theory, my book should be twice as powerful. So get out there, buy the book, promote the book, Foundations of Private Property Society Theory. It looks at introducing society in a way that allows voluntary actions, free exchange, without a central planner attempting to rule for everybody, which is what Marx is about. So yeah, maybe it took 120 pages instead of 60, but I assure you it's worth it. But let's get back to Karl Marx here and his ideas on advancing. He had 10 specific measures that he introduced in the Communist Manifesto that would move an economy, a country, a society toward his communist utopia. Let's take a look at what they are. And he said these were for advanced countries. The first one was the abolition of private property. So again, it's completely opposite of my perspective, but that I think most people understand that that's hardcore communism, when the land is controlled by the government. So he's a long way on the road to communism when you've got the government owning all the land. But you'll see he moves back and forth on this. Number two, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Now that's common here for many, many people to call for a progressive and graduated income tax. Many so-called middle of the roaders call for it, in addition to Bernie Sanders and AOC. Are you calling for it? If you are, welcome to the club. You're a Marxist. That's what Karl Marx called for. Number three, abolition of all right of inheritance. Okay, we don't really have that in the United States. No one really wants to abolish it, except one group, and I'll get to them in a minute. But what we do have is a situation where the left is calling for more and more taxes on inheritance. So it's a step in the Marxian direction of elimination of inheritance. It's not going that far, what we've got here in the United States right now, but it's a step in that direction with greater and greater inheritance taxes. Sort of a hate for people who inherit money. Now the one group that is against the inheritance taxes would be those people that are against intellectual property rights in the first place. If they're against intellectual property rights, they're certainly against the inheritance of intellectual property rights. And I'm not going to argue the intellectual property case here, but I direct you to Murray Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State. He explains there the difference between copyright law and patent law with regard to intellectual property, and why the structure of copyright law is the way that intellectual property rights should be structured across the board. And my view is in line with his. So just check it out. Look up Man, Economy, and State. That's the name of the book. And you can dig in there and look and see what he has to say about copyright and patent and intellectual property. Number 4, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. So Marx was against immigrants. If you're against immigrants, welcome to the club. I guess you're a Marxist. You want to take all their property. You got a problem with immigrants, you're with Marx on that one. As far as the rebels, he apparently felt that if he was in control, you're going to have to crack down on people who are opposing what you're saying. So for those who are calling for the prosecution of people who took part in the, as Putin called it, stroll into the Capitol, you're trying to crack down on rebels. You're right there with Marx. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and exclusive monopoly. Okay, we're very, very close to this with the Federal Reserve. If you're in favor of the Federal Reserve for any reason, whatever, you're in line with Marx. Welcome to the club. Now, I point out the lefties want even more. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants the post office to get involved in the banking sector by opening up bank accounts for individuals. There are also legislatures calling for the Federal Reserve to open up bank accounts for individuals. This is all Marxian stuff. If you're in favor of this, you're a Marxist. Welcome to the club. 6, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. Okay, so this is a little bit of a Green New Deal in here when you're talking about improvement of the soil for a common plan. Marxist was just big on central planning. He wanted everything planned. So there's a bit of that in there, but also the extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. We don't really have as much of that here. What we have is private-public partnerships, which are crony deals, and we have government agencies, everything from the Federal Aviation Administration, Transportation Administration, FDA, CDC, whatever it is. They're all sort of making rules, making regulations. So there is still private property ownership to a large degree in the United States, but it is controlled private property ownership, which actually most of the time benefits the most powerful people in the sector because they have the ability to hire and pay for the people that will be able to influence the agencies. But the idea of agencies, by government agencies setting the rules, is actually a fascist kind of perspective. It's what you had in Nazi Germany. It was kind of socialist in one way, but it wasn't what Marx wanted, the complete control of property, capital, businesses by the government, but sort of an indirect way control without the ownership aspect. Number 8, equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Okay, so by industrial armies, he's talking about unions. So again, that gets back to his idea of this struggle between labor and capital, which really doesn't exist. And again, the cultural Marxists admit this. The laborers are very happy under capitalism, and they're not going to revolt. It's not going to happen. But he's trying to instigate stuff. So unions is one way to instigate that stuff. So if you're a union man, welcome to the club. You're probably a Marxist. Number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. So again, this is another Marxian notion, this equality thing, this equity thing that we see a lot of talk about now. It's the idea that somehow you can make everything equal. A city is different than the country. Some people prefer living in cities. Some people prefer living in suburbs. Some people prefer living way out in the country. But they're not the same. You can't divide everything up, put somebody by the shore, put somebody else in the middle of the country and think it's the same experience. Not only is it different views, but the soil might be different. The weather over the 4 seasons might be different. There's absolutely nothing about nature that suggests you can make everything equal. As Murray Rothbard wrote in a book, egalitarianism is a revolt against nature. It can't be done. So if you're in favor of equity, equality of outcome versus equality before the law, if you're in favor of equality of outcome, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to create a society where there's equity everywhere. You're part of the Marxian club, and you fail to recognize the very important notion that egalitarianism is, again, as Rothbard put it, a revolt against nature. Number 10, free education for all children in public schools. Okay, so we have that now. If you're in favor of public schools, welcome to the club. You're a Marxist. You support something right out of Karl Marx, out of the Communist Manifesto. Now we're getting worse. Bernie Sanders and a number of others want free school at the college level. But here's the problem. You can't just give money out in terms of free schools. You have to determine, well, what is a legitimate school and what is not. If I start teaching my views to a junior high school, or college, is the government going to pay me to teach this kind of stuff that is against central planning? It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So whenever you get a central planner, they're really siphoning from the multitude of opportunities that are available in a free market system. And they don't create money out of nowhere. They try to with the money printing they do, but that just leads to inflation and other problems. But essentially, one way or the other, you're paying for that, quote, free public school, either through higher taxes or through inflation, which is a tax. So it's not free. It's not free. What it is limiting in choices. It has to. The government is never going to have a situation where anybody who calls himself a teacher, professor, whatever, and has his own school, they're not going to give him money. It's only going to be certified by government experts as to who gets it. So you're getting a situation where it's limited. Whenever you receive hear free from the government, you should read controlled by the government. The government wants to control the sector. Nothing is free. You're paying for it, but through a disguised way, through taxes, through the inflation. But what it really is all about is control. Marx understood that. That's why when he lists 10 things that have to be, that are key steps to moving towards Marxism, free public school, free education was one of it. He understood how important that was to control the education that people get. So that's it. So if you support any of these 10 items, welcome to the club. You're a Marxist, at least as far as that step is going. And if you're supporting the cultural Marxist revolution we see going on now with this wokeism and stuff, you're basically moving along the Marxist step ladder based upon what the Marxists in Germany and the Frankfurt School and Gramsci saw with regard to the only way to advance Marxism. But bizarrely, you're then calling for stuff that advances the economic Marxism that Gramsci and the Frankfurt School saw no one wanted. Everybody's happy with the capitalist system. It raises all boats. It raises the standard of living. It's a very, very confused thinking, but it dominates. It dominates because we have a lot of leaders that are incentivized by government to teach this stuff because it's very, very central planning oriented. Governments love it because it gives them opportunity to control in more and more sectors. That's what's really going on. That's what Marxism is. This Marxist advance at the current stage is really all about. It's about a power grab. It's about controlling more and more sectors, which means less and less choice, less and less freedom. That's what this is all about. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out my website, economicpolicyjournal.com. We're right about the economy Monday through Friday, and also Saturday and Sunday. I don't stop. I talk about economic policy, economic theoretical issues, personalities that touch on economics in one sense or another. Don't miss it. economicpolicyjournal.com. Talk to you next week.